So the next one, we are going to be reviewing the year. So we maybe need to think about some of the
So
topics.
we have December to do. So we have 3 more topics to do the normal December episode.
Oh, I didn't really. I thought you were just replacing the normal December one with the Christmas special.
No. We're going to do a. I think we're going to do
You're making me work hard.
on your break. Yeah.
Hey,
So,
I'm a retired man.
we normally, I know, but we normally do a. Hello and welcome to the Cloud Therapist channel. I'm Richard Simon. This is the November episode, November 2024 episode of Cloud State of Play. I have, as always, and it's become quite customary now, the captivating Paul Bevan with me. Paul is the director. We've got to get. I need to capture all of these, right? I need to
bizarre as we go along.
Well, I have ChatGPT to blame. I have Copilot to blame for that, right?
All right. Okay.
Yeah. There you go. Okay. So
Paul, don't give up the day job then.
Yeah. Don't give up the day job, Copilot. Yeah. Which is I don't know what it does normally. Writing people's essays or something.
Anyway, hello, Richard.
Yeah, hello, Paul. So Paul is the director of infrastructure researchers at Bloor Research. Yeah. So how are you doing?
All right. Yeah. Some interesting things going on in the world of cloud and infrastructure, aren't there? To put it mildly.
Yeah, put it mildly. Exactly. Okay. So good to see you again. Well, the year is almost out, Paul. So we've got this is the November one, and we've got one more coming up for December. So what we've decided to do this year is that the December episode will be just another normal episode, and then you're going to have the pleasure of seeing Paul again, and maybe some other guests, or at least one guest, turning up for a Cloud State of Play sort of Christmas special, if you like, and that Christmas episode or Christmas edition is going to have a review of the year. So we're going to reflect back on the year, and we're going to see what's happened. And I think we can probably just sum it up in one term: Gen AI, right? We can just put that up on the screen and walk away after 10 seconds. Put the end credits on after 10 seconds, right?
Unless I want you to really rant, in which case I might put up repatriation and see how
yes
I get.
Oh yes, cloud repatriation. Yes, we're definitely going to go there. Definitely, especially after the clouded summit that we attended, which is, if it's not out yet, depending on when you're watching this, it will be coming out. There's a review of the Clouded Summit coming out. Anyway, so the year in review episode will actually kind of turn into that sort of Christmas special episode, as we say, and then we'll see how how things go. It might end up being a Christmas party. Who knows? So we'll see how things progress during how badly the whole thing
might make more sense than usual.
Yes, some truths will come out of that. Anyway, so the topics for the November episode are number one, data platform. So we're going to be reviewing a data platform chart, which somebody actually put out on LinkedIn, and their kind of description of how a sort of a data platform really ought to be. It's kind of our continued obsession with data. So we've kind of done the sovereignty thing. Whatever else have we done? What was the last one we did as well? We talked about something else about data. I can't remember now. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Now,
I'm older than you and I can't remember either.
Yeah, and we talked about, I think we've talked about data mesh and things like that in the past as well. So there's like a data theme running, I think, through some of the Cloud State of Play episodes. So that's the first one. So we're going to look at that chart. We're going to look at the definitions. We're going to look at kind of what that sort of design, if you like, looks like. And then the second one is Intel with woes inside, as I would call it. So see, I was waiting for that. That's why I didn't tell you what the full title was going to be. So it's no longer Intel inside, it's Intel with woes inside. that's the second topic. So we're going to look at Intel and kind of some of the recent activities around that. Going to mention some very, very recent news. In fact, it was only at the time of recording, only happened yesterday or last night. So yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about that and kind of just reflect a little bit back, remind you guys about one of the previous episodes that we've done. So we had been the seers, or four seers, where we've kind of been predicting this for over a year now. So that's second topic. Third topic is the State of Secret Sprawl Report 2024. This is by a company called GitGuardian. So they brought out a report, a very nice report actually, about the state of secrets sprawl and what's happening with secrets management and things like that in the whole, I don't know, open source, cloud, AI sort of space. So we're going to go through that report and pick out some interesting stats from that as well. Okay, so Paul, let us go to data platform, which is our first topic. Now, this was created by a gentleman called Deepak Bhardwaj, I think, and I apologize if I'm butchering the surname there. So Deepak put this out. I don't know Deepak personally. It just came on my radar, and it seemed like an interesting thing to look at. And I thought, yes, this will be kind of considering our data obsession at the moment, and we'll have a chat about it. So I kind of thought we'll maybe go through the chart that you provided. I will provide links for this, by the way, if I can. You might see it on the screen here somewhere. If it's not on there, I've forgotten to do it. So just look at the description of the video, and you'll see the link to the data platform chart. So he calls it a kind of a data platform architecture, and he's talking about how to build a data platform today, which is quite ambitious. I thought that's kind of a big ask, and he actually does say that. He says, building one today is no small feat, and I do agree with that. I think, but he says if we focus on the essential pieces, we can make the journey easier, and that's fine. It's kind of quite a high level, I'd have thought, kind of architecture design, and he's kind of looking at the core components. But Paul, what was your impression when I shared that with you?
I mean, it was very thorough. He's been through sort of everything, and we can obviously pick out some of the salient parts. But it felt as though he was coming from a technology viewpoint that's probably a little out of date now. And in particular, the thing that struck me was the way in which he was ingesting all the data into a series of first data warehouses and then sort of data lakes to do the sort of extract, transform, load. And in today's world, it just struck me that, that's an approach that's been shown to be not flexible enough to deal with the changing analytical requirements, many of which are real time. And therefore, it just sort of struck me that, the idea of extracting data from multiple different sources to work on it in a data warehouse, to move it then into a data lake or a data mart before you then hand it out to end users, or seemed to be, I mean, he used the term, no, it was a data lake you bring it into first, and he went to lake house, that's right. So the sort of steps were, there's too many steps in there for what most people require is almost like real-time information these days. And I think what I'm seeing is that the move is towards, don't move the data, don't try and do it twice, just suck it into and using, this is where data fabric comes in. It's where the ability to separate the data plane from the control plane from the data plane, and actually abstract that layer that the data fabric can do, that you can then pull data in from a number of different database types, because we've got so many different database types now. The days of SQL being, SQL being the main type of data out there is sort of long gone. So multiple data types coming in. And really what you need is a data plane that enables you to abstract that layer and provide, if you like, the code, the sort of translation for the analytics to be able to take it straight from the database.
Yeah. Yes. I yeah, I think I'm trying to decide where to start with this. So, I mean, I'm not in complete disagreement. I think there's a lot of, good elements. For example, um, the if you would, I guess you would call it the governance layer,
Yeah.
where you have, a number of factors there, and that looks okay to me.
Yeah.
In terms of what he's trying to maybe, bring into that. And then there's a kind of a infrastructure or operational layer below everything. So that kind of gives you the access management, the storage, the compute, blah, blah, blah. Again, okay. The element that I'm confused on a little bit, and you might be able to correct me, I believe you touched on it, is from the data sources. So you've got kind of your usual suspects of files, databases or whatever, kind of your data sources. That goes into a data lake, but then goes into, or is the persistent storage is, I'm just looking at the chart here. Okay, so he's doing persistent staging in that one. Sorry, I missed that bit. Okay. And then that takes it into a kind of a raw data, which transfers it from the data lake into the data lake house. So the lake house is a combination of the best of both worlds of a data lake and a data warehouse. But the output seems to be from there into, he calls it a business data vault in the lake house. And then that goes into a data warehouse again.
I know it's too many steps.
And only then is it at the presentation layer, the data consumer layer, because then that pours into, apps and users and intelligence and so on. So, and you kind of touched on this. I would have thought that just that portion, the data lake house, and the data warehouse is kind of why we, people have in that data space have been talking a huge amount around a data mesh. The whole idea is that you, as you said, not move things around. People can keep their silos, but we'll do like a federated approach, right? So we might keep things like security and presentation, access layers, and so on, at the data mesh level. But then, if sales, manufacturing, marketing, accounts, finance, whatever, want to keep their data, whatever form that's sitting in, that's fine. But we will just federate all of that using a so-called data mesh. So those three boxes,
or a fabric,
or well, yeah. So yeah, or the fabric, is kind of, I think for me, feels a little bit kind of wider, and it's kind of, looking at at a wider picture. But just for that bit, because that is quite crucial, right? That is that sort of whole ETL thing. Do we ETL or do we not ETL kind of thing, right? And I think that bit of it, I don't know, maybe I need to get hold of Deepak and say, Deepak, can you explain that bit a little bit more? Because I'm a bit confused.
One of the questions it raises, of course, is, part of the ETL process was, you didn't really have confidence necessarily in the data quality that you were extracting, and you had to put it through another set of processes.
Yeah.
And to an extent, that's not changed. I think the question really is, where do you do that?
Yes.
Do you do that? And so my sense is that you just need to make sure that each of your operational databases has good quality data in it.
Yes.
That's the responsibility, because most analytics you see these days are, require pretty much up-to-date data. That's where we're headed to, whether it's streaming analytics or whatever you're doing, it tends to be that the data you require is really, really up to date. Now, if there's a database that you need to hold or a data warehouse you need to hold with, lots of historic data in that could be used in the sort of, one-off sort of analytics or reviews of performance or whatever over a period of time, that's fine. But most of what we're seeing is that analytics is almost part of the sort of pipeline these days. It's literally so. So this idea of federation is absolutely right. But of course, the issue of quality doesn't go away. You've still got to make sure that the data is decent quality. But I think that sits outside this platform. It's it's a responsibility of a data management function to make sure that each database, whether it's time series, it's vector, it's relational, it's NoSQL or whatever, has decent data in it. But I think if you try and do that in the platform, you create a bottleneck.
Yeah. I mean, he does go through each of the layers and components in the original post. Like I said, I'll try and provide a link to the description for that.
But to be fair, he's got everything. I mean, he talks about the event bus and stream analytics. He talks about machine learning integration. But they're almost like they're essential components of the platform. The platform needs to be able to deliver that and so the idea of you having to build that, you should be looking for a platform that's got that ability already baked into it.
Yeah, there is that element. And then the other element, I think that is kind of, you touched on it in terms of the quality of our data, is that, what you and I have seen, for example, recently from the Big Data London show that we attended. There's, by the way, content coming out soon in regards to that as well. So do look out for that on the channel. The elements that were, I think, missing there was that things like that, data observability that we picked up on as a term, right? I mean, that seemed to be quite prominent in that space, and it seemed to be important, and that would lend itself to this kind of design, really, that would be kind of, or should be part of this kind of design, because that is, as you said, it's ensuring that that initial data quality.
I think you ignore the whole governance issue around quality and security and sort of availability at your peril. So I think highlighting that, as he has done, is quite right. But I think it comes in much earlier. It was sort of almost right down. It almost felt like an afterthought in the way he structured it. I would have put those governance and security right up at the top of a platform that says, actually this platform needs to be able to do that on day one, whether you've got a database or any data sources to ingest. If you haven't got that right in terms of the policies and the procedures and automated those policies and procedures beforehand, then you start ingesting data, you're going to go in round and round loops trying to put it right.
Yeah. So in the description, where in the diagram where it says data sources, he says that is kind of the collection area. That's where you begin, data collection. Again, he talks about legacy systems, multi-formats, all becoming a challenge. So requiring a robust ETL, process, the extract, transform, load.
This whole idea of abstracting the data plane from the control plane means that it doesn't matter what you can bring it in much more easily, and it's a fairly simple set of instructions then to the analytics engine to say, take this time series data or take this vector data coming in and display it to the analytics part of the platform in a way it understands. And then if you then want to store the results of that away somewhere for further analysis, great. But don't go through this whole, because the challenge we've always heard with data warehouses and the like is that keeping it up to date and keeping it clean is a real challenge.
Yeah, and then he's explaining the data lake house, and the data warehouse components in the description. So he's calling the data lake a staging area. Um, so this is the holding zone where your raw data first lands. And then the data lake house, or lake house as is on the chart, that's your data vault. So he's saying once the data has been cleaned up, presumably in the previous stage, it moves to a more structured environment, the data lakehouse or the lakehouse. This area provides flexibility for both raw and processed data. And then it moves to a data warehouse where that data mart can be found, as you said.
And it was interesting because you were talking about, very much a structured data environment in that data warehouse. And it was almost like you're creating the fixed set of reports that firms traditionally used to live by. You had a very structured data warehouse that had customer information, it had product information, it had sales information, and everything was highly structured. And I just get the impression that in fact that's too limiting these days. For an end user almost needs to be able to do the prompt, doesn't it? Just find me this, and this,
Yeah.
rather than all the rather structured work that goes on. I'm sure there's still place for structured reports. So maybe we shouldn't dismiss that element of it as far as possible. But it's almost like don't try and pre-process it too far beforehand, because you'll never get it right.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see where he would perceive a data mesh fitting into that. Is it kind of, in those three boxes, the data lake, the lake house, and the data warehouse? Is it kind of not replacing, but is it kind of managing that? Does it kind of federate those, like, as I said, or is that at the data sources, which is the earlier step? I don't know how that would really kind of fit in with that, and maybe that's just because I don't know enough about sort of a data mesh and how practically they can be implemented.
And the straight answer is neither do I. So again,
Yeah.
we can make an awful mess of this. But I mean, the reaction I've always had, data fabric is a centralized control. Data mesh is a far more distributed control. I think a data platform needs a centralized approach, to be honest.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, yeah, I think that definition is fairly accurate in terms of kind of what it offers. And then there is no provision for, and maybe this is because it's sort of, this is probably out of date or a bit update or needs to be updated or whatever. But more recently the discussion has been around things like Oracle databases and SQL Server, gaining that generative AI element. So you're actually not having to write SQL queries anymore. You can just natural language prompting, a conversation with your database, and then ask it to generate what you want.
Yeah.
And it just responds in natural language.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the direction of travel. I think I made that comment earlier. You just want to be able to say to it, find me the results for this, and then literally say what it is. That's where it's heading. Whether it's capable of doing that today is another matter. But I mean, I think but the whole premise of building your own data platform seems to be a step too far for most people. There are data platforms out there now that are worth having a look at, that I think cover these sort of areas, but also go into the using a fabric or a mesh to federate and to abstract the data layer away from the control plane, so that you get this ability to just pull in data and very simply stream it into the analytics process with relatively simple commands.
Yeah. I like I said, data observability, and data mesh. I'd like to see how that would fit in. And maybe that will kind of clarify the picture about, I mean, backup and restore is there on the, on the infrastructure sort of.
You might need one of our data experts at Bloor. I mean, because I'm infrastructure, not data, but I always hear and listen to them when we're having meetings, and you can hear, chatting away about this, but I'm not sure I'm technically competent to have that discussion with you if you suddenly wanted to have it.
Yeah, no, I think, like I said, I'd be interested in that. Maybe I'll speak to Deepak directly and just see if he can provide an update or an explanation.
Yeah.
If I do, I will drop that in the description of the video. So do look out for that if I get a chance to do that. It may not be when I release the video, maybe a little bit later, but I always go back and update the descriptions with new information if I find anything new.
But I, the one thing I would say, it's sort of my parting shot, is that everybody should be looking, any significant organization needs a proper data platform.
Yeah, and this is, I think, maybe showing that, things have kind of A, moved on, and B, maybe got slightly more complicated. You've also got other newer elements coming in, like AI and generative AI and so on. So all of that needs to be today. If you're kind of doing this stuff or you're modernizing it, you need to look into all of this.
Yeah.
And look at data meshes, look at data observability and so on.
And actually, him using the term data platform architecture is not far wrong. There needs to be an architecture, but whether all the elements, whether they all sit on the platform or come before the platform, but that's a data architecture. So maybe the data platform architecture is too wrong. But I mean,
maybe design.
Now. I mean,
maybe design would have been a better thing. It's not really at that sort of architecture level. I think it's too high level. But anyway, okay. Hey, if you are enjoying the content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Thank you. Let's move on to the second one. So this is
smiling already.
This is the Intel with woes inside, as we said. So the first bit of news is that, as we were saying before we started the recording, Pat Gelsinger, who's or was the CEO of Intel, has now stepped down or retired, as some reports are putting it. I think more accurately, he's been pushed out by the board, is my understanding, and some reports have actually focused on that. Only after 3 years. He's apparently an Intel boy, which I didn't know through and through, because he was actually at Intel.
He was an engineer on the 486 program, wasn't he?
Yeah, it's interesting. And then he went to wherever, VMware at some point, and then came back
Dell EMC before VMware. I mean, so he's been around the block.
Yeah, he's been around the block. Always worked for a vendor, one kind or another, and then came back to Intel 3 years ago. We actually covered kind of Intel and AMD's duopoly, as we called it. And we said, is it under threat from ARM? Now, we did this in October of 2023. So we actually did it over a year ago. And we were kind of forecasting at that point, the kind of where is Intel going to go? And, with the threat of ARM, and this was actually even before the, Microsoft made the announcements around the kind of the Copilot PCs, right? Which, are all using pretty much, or mostly using ARM processors. The deal between Microsoft to run, Windows PCs basically on ARM-based processors, namely sort of Qualcomm's, Snapdragon and so on. Qualcomm is also involved in the Intel thing because there was rumors a few months ago that they wanted to acquire Intel as well. And more recently, with Pat Gelsinger in place as the CEO, he's been really presiding over a number of redundancies or layoffs if you're in the US. So redundancies at Intel. There's just so many reports on this. I'm not going to even bother with the numbers and stuff. There's just so much. But I picked up a couple of interesting ones from the register. So one which reported a $16.6 billion loss that Intel filed recently. That's in 2024, this year, I believe. There was another article which was talking about Intel getting a little bit stingy with their coffee. So they actually removed the free coffee and then they brought it back again or something, which is really, really strange stuff going on. But what you and I were saying has kind of started to become, over the 2024 period has become a reality as that market has maybe shrunk and, partners and vendors have kind of, moved away. And certainly the Apple thing, whenever it was 2-3 years ago now, that's, certainly affected them. More recently, Microsoft by going to, to ARM processors for their platform, for their Copilot PCs and so on, kind of being that being their premier platform. So Pat has been busy chopping down, the number of employees, and yeah, I think this is maybe a great time for Qualcomm to make that bid proper.
Well, I think they'll find it quite hard to swallow, actually. I think that's going to be a difficult one for them. I mean, one of the things that seems to have caused more than a little concern amongst the investors of Intel has been what's been happening with Foundry. And, it's swallowed up an awful lot of money, and a lot of the losses that they're seeing, I mean, their year-on-year losses are sort of in the billions of dollars. Not, they're not, and there's really very little prospect of them turning a profit on Foundry until at least 2026. And even then, given some of the problems they've had with both their chip design and the fabrication process, there's no guarantee that they will be, that it will turn profitable and that the foundry will be able to take business away from others. At the moment it relies almost solely on Intel business. But the reason I say it could be difficult for Qualcomm to swallow it, in fact, I don't know Qualcomm's ultimate ownership. Is it Chinese? I'm not.
No, it's I think aren't they Taiwan? I believe. I'm not sure.
Okay, all right. I need to look at that one, but obviously part of the reason, for Foundry's existence is the Americans being very concerned about what happens to TSMC if China invades Taiwan, and with Donald Trump arriving on the scene and putting pressure on China, that might happen sooner rather than later is a fear out there. But clearly the American government has, got some concerns about the ability of the United States to have a foundry of its own. And there are some very specific clauses in the sort of way the money's been given to Intel from the American government that says, that Intel have got to maintain 50.1% ownership of that. All those sort of issues mean, and the guarantees of where it's going to be made and for how long, and all those sort of issues that says that could get very messy. So I think that, plus the fact, as I say, there's no, at the moment you're thinking maybe one of the easiest ways would be to help TSMC expand their footprint into the States by taking it over. Might be a smarter move.
Yeah. Well, okay, so a little bit of correction. Qualcomm is actually a US company.
Oh, is it? All right.
So I never thought that. And
I apologize.
You never tell from the name. But US company, okay? Not Taiwan, not South Korea or anything.
Well, in which case it might be a lot easier for them to acquire Intel.
Well, exactly. Yes. So that's that. You touched on the CHIPS Act, I think, which was the money that the Biden administration gave Intel earlier this year. And Pat Gelsinger was rubbing his hands thinking, okay, I can prop up the numbers for 2024. That's another year I don't have to worry about, with the $10 billion or whatever it was injection from the Biden administration. But as you said, there was that little proviso, which he didn't read the the fine print. And that's always important, dear audience, to actually read the fine print on anything before you sign it. And they actually said you have to keep your manufacturing. Your fabs have to be local. They can't be TSMC or somewhere else, basically. So Drat has not been able to do that. And I actually also read that.
And yet you see that the Intel Products Division has shipped its processor into TSM and TSMC.
Well, yeah, that's the problem. I mean, I think they did that a while ago.
They did. It's not
the manufacturing. Yeah. So that's certainly a problem. Then the other problem was, I think that figure, that injection, that $10 billion injection actually got reduced. Was again another article that I read as well. So actually only about $3 billion of it you could play with or something initially. So the administration decided to, I think, pull some of it back.
I mean, the underlying issue here is that Intel lost its way.
Yes.
Didn't keep its eyes on where the market was going, didn't keep up to date, thought the PC world and the server x86 server world was going to go on for a lot longer than it did. Didn't really take account of what happened with AI, what happened with NVIDIA generally, but with
cloud
computing, all sorts of things, and really didn't keep their eyes on the ball, and therefore they've got a king-sized problem in terms of. And you look at it and you say the reduction in headcount, but just the sort of the whole atmosphere around Intel smacks a little bit of a Boeing.
Yes.
Doesn't it?
Yes.
You've got design problems with performance of chip design, manufacturing problems, all sorts of issues that says there's been a general decline in competence in the whole organization, which is going to take some time to fix.
I think if the board hadn't acted in this 3-year tenure of Pat Gelsinger, he would have been in danger of replacing Oppenheimer as not the destroyer of worlds, but the destroyer of companies, because his tenure at VMware was just as bad. They acquired, and again, we've covered this a ton of times in the past. We talked about it when the Broadcom thing came up this year, and prior to that, I think 2022 was the first time you and I spoke about it. October, I think, episode or something of 2022, when the Broadcom acquisition was just announced at that time. And then it went through the whole thing in 2023, and then got sort of, I think, approved end of 2023. So I think, he would have been very much in danger of, being labeled as that. At least for me, labeling him as that, because I just think it's that lack of vision, no innovation, no kind of, or just kind of, I don't know, is it stubbornness? Is it kind of just dogmatic doubling down on strategy?
It's the term is marketing myopia. They get completely blind. I mean, at Unisys we got the same problem, exactly the same issue when I was there, and you would see, this stubborn, or as you say, stubbornness was probably the right about killing the sort of I mean, they talk about eating your children, don't they? Horrible term, but I mean, you get the term. You got to learn to eat your children, and. Yeah, but certainly it's really hard. People see the cash cow and think, "Oh, I must protect that," but they don't create the space for the innovation. They simply don't create the space for innovation. And you see it over and over again. IBM went through it. VMware went through it. They've all gone through it, and it's generally, I would just use the term marketing myopia. They simply lose the ability to see what's coming around the corner of them.
I think it's, as there's a number of ways you can describe it. As a leader, you're not taking advice from the younger generation, the newer people, the innovators in the company. You're surrounded by a board which is just as old as you, if not older, and everybody's there waiting for their shares to be vested or whatever, kind of thing. And even when the brand stuff hits the fan, as with the with these recent not just the losses, but also the redundancies, the rounds of redundancies that he's had to do. In the register report, one of the register reports about the redundancy specifically, it said, ever the optimist, Gelsinger couldn't help but put a positive spin on the ordeal. Ordeal. That's how they described it. So, you know, yes, and we'll maybe just get to a list of those.
There's some great articles out there that we'll share. I mean, the Register one, and then was it the Future, their spin-off, the Register spin-off, what's it called? Future Technology or Future. Very, very good article on that. It's worth the read. Yeah. I'll give you the link to it. Really,
yes. So
but if there's anything that you can say in his defense, is that, well, maybe it is the biggest mistake he's always made is moving to a company at the wrong time. I mean, he moved to VMware when it was already on the downward path. He'd moved to Intel when it was on the downward path. And you think either you have a huge ego, thinks you can turn it round against all the indicators.
Nobody
or you're blind to it. You think it's wonderful.
Nobody wanted the job, right?
Yeah.
So I think this has been a long time coming, and if people like you and I are complete laymen to this and haven't got a clue, we're not really experts at any of this, fab plants and processes and whatever else, but we can see that there is things happening in the industry. And I think he even went as far quite recently. One of the articles I read, I don't have it here necessarily, but I'll try and dig it up, where he actually said, don't have to worry about mobile. Mobile's not our concern. He's continued to dismiss that decades long, ignorance of the mobile market. Right. And this has been, all the way from, low power, the Intel's inability to really come up with something that is as low power as the ARM processors. They've had this problem for decades. They've just not been able to do it. Not to the extent of ARM has been able to do it anyway.
But again, that's about vision, isn't it? I'm sure there are
absolutely
really good technical engineers inside Intel who, if they'd been given the right brief, but they've probably been given a brief that says, I want you to improve on the, let's be silly about this, improve on the x86, get as much out of it because it's really the only way to go. And actually, somebody ought to turn around to them and said, no, actually, it isn't the only way to go. We really need to do X, Y, Z. And I don't think anybody did that. It was just, okay, we'll go and design we'll put more lipstick on the pig. We'll design a faster pig, all those sort of things.
Yes.
And actually, what ARM were doing, what NVIDIA
a faster but fatter pig.
Yeah, faster but fatter pig. It's sort of classic. So you do feel for some of the technical experts who are in there, who are probably very good at their jobs, but the direction of the company, I mean, it's about time, that they shot the whole board, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I'm betting you that, they have IP and patents and even prototypes that will knock the socks off ARM, and maybe from 15, 20 years ago, and it just never made it to a product. It was killed off or just shelved because that's not what they wanted to focus on.
That's not what they thought the market was going. And because they were making such a load of money out of the x86 range, and it seemed to be growing and growing and growing, and there was like, oh, why do I want to dilute that?
Yeah, and we always know that if you're not first to a market, then you're struggling to really try and sort of catch up. It's very hard to then get into that market and get a share.
Oh, and things like Foundry and Fab, the cost, the barriers to entry, so having effectively allowed your foundry or your fabrication business to atrophy, to then try and compete with the likes of TSMC and Samsung, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg before you see any profit. And this is not a market, we can talk about the short-termism of stock markets, and yet they allowed Amazon to go on losing money year after year after year because of I think the vision of where Amazon were trying to take their business. The number of times I heard people saying, how long before the stock market or the investors pull the plug on Amazon because it's not making money. Nowadays, they're laughing, and I suppose it's a bit like Tesla and SpaceX and all the other ones. It's the vision's there. They're losing an arm and a leg at times, and yet people still keep going with it. Whereas the attitude is wrong inside Intel, I think, and obviously, therefore, the view of the market on Intel was negative.
Yeah, so I think the positive spin was that he retired, but I mean, I've read other reports, and these were actually in the headlines. I didn't have to go into the article itself, but it actually just said the board got bored with him, I guess, if you want to call it that, and then wanted to, made an ultimatum. They just said, you need to, you have the option of, stepping down, or we just basically sack you. And the stepping down is a retirement, called a retirement.
Yeah, the speed with which it happened. Because although, apparently, it all happened over the course of, about 24 hours by the sound of it.
Yeah, it was on Sunday, I think.
Yeah, it was Sunday. And so, there can be no other explanation other than there was a falling out. They obviously were on a different page completely.
That, and most likely end of year upcoming results, or whatever I don't know what their fiscal is, whether it's with the calendar or not, but
quite often American, not always, but more often than not, they tend to be end of calendar year.
So if that's the case, then the numbers are probably worse than what has been reported before. Who knows?
Yeah.
But anyway, so I think, did we cover everything? I think we covered everything. The only points I wanted to say were, there was a number of howlers along the way. There was it's a litany of really bad decisions and, inability to make a decision, lack of vision, no innovation, and ignoring, the low power market, the mobile market completely, not exploring anything to do with risk chips. I mean, they did a while back, but I mean, it wasn't anything serious. They stuck to CISC chips, right? The complex instruction set computer, not the reduced instruction set computer. That's the RISC and CISC, if you're not familiar with those. And I would also say the complete obsession with the Wintel thing, with the Wintel kind of partnership, the Microsoft partnership. Can you imagine the combination of a low power x86 based processor, and I mean like competing with ARM, in terms of power and cost, capturing the Android market when Android was taking off? Can you imagine what that would have done for Intel? Right? Versus, Google going to ARM or whoever, manufacturer of ARM processors. Maybe it was even Qualcomm at the time, who knows? And then say to them, well, I want to run this Android operating system, mobile operating system on your chip, and then, porting it to that, and then, after a couple of attempts, making it work, and then it's actually becoming what the market has now become for Android, versus the Apple sort of.
I mean, you combine lack of ability to take risk, lack of vision, with also some really poor engineering that's gone on in recent years, and delays to exist, what are essentially extensions to the existing range. And we've had delays and performance issues and, red faces at Intel when, supercomputer going into one of the American US departments of, public sector, didn't outperform the ARM one, and it's like, oh, my goodness, what a shame.
Yeah, and also just continuing that list, and it is a litany of of things. Microsoft it's got to the point where Microsoft decided to move away, you know, and I think they will continue, because even though the cost of, you know, Copilot PCs is greater, and certainly the Surface range is greater than your average PC, the results, the outcome of it, which is a kind of a, you know, a more prestige category, you know, of PC Windows-based products, and the length of time, the amount of time on the battery, the battery time, you know, it's just does not, you know, nowhere near, Intel is nowhere near any of that capability. And this is the early models. These are the, like, the first gen model. Let's see what they do in the second gen and the third gen with Qualcomm, you know, processors and so on. The final ones, I think, there. So we've kind of mentioned Android markets and so on. The final one's been the, you know, the AI market. So they released the Gaudi, I think, family of AI chips recently. That was announced, I think, in the summer or something. Again, trying to include information on all of this in the description of the video. And then recently, the conversation was, how do we compete with NVIDIA? I was like, are you joking? NVIDIA, excuse me, but NVIDIA is like a $3.5 trillion, you know, valuated company now. You're a barely $5 billion or
You're
something.
you're trying to cut costs, and NVIDIA is throwing money at AI like there was no tomorrow.
Yeah, and you want to now compete in the GPU market.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I mean, they haven't done it in the NPU market, which is, you know, the bedrock of, you know, Qualcomm and, you know, and others in that space. I think even Nvidia's in that space, and certainly I think Microsoft and others are, you know,
NPU.
NPU. So that's the neural processing
Oh,
unit.
okay. Yeah.
So that's the, you know, in these Copilot PCs and PCs going forward, you're going to have your usual CPU, your usual GPU, but you're also going to have an NPU. The NPU is going to be an ARM, whether it's, you know, it's regardless of what architecture your actual PC is, because the, you know, the agents that you're going to run in the future, and certainly like, you know, Copilot and so on, will all be small language models, SLMs.
Yeah.
And they'll all need local processing.
Yeah.
They're not APIing back to ChatGPT and, you know, whatever's running in the big hyperscale data center. They'll actually all do their stuff locally, because they also need to know you locally. Yeah, in terms of, you know, sorting out your, I don't know, calendar, or booking a restaurant, booking your flight, and, you know, that kind of stuff. Right? All these agents are going to be running locally. So NPUs, neural processing units, are coming in to handle that processing. Again, that processing gets offloaded from the CPU, just like we did for graphics, you know, decades ago. Now we're going to offload that type of, you know, processing and activity to an NPU going forward. I mean, in the future, I think it'll just end up being in the processor.
Yeah.
You know, so whatever processor you're going to be running, the NPU will be, you know, part of the silicon. But at the moment, it's a separate component, and it's coming in like that because I think nobody's kind of put it all together. But yeah, so I think all of that is just, it's a unmitigated disaster. It really is.
Yeah, and it's a shame. And I mean, I've grown up with Intel. I mean, as I came into the industry in '83, you know, we were just getting to the 8086, 8086. And I remember being on holiday in France, and somebody a neighbor on this sort of site we were on, said, "Oh, I'm working for a company you've probably not heard of before. It's called Intel," you know, and you think, wow. So, and that was my first year in Burroughs, back in '83. So yeah, and I think I sold my first computers, which were Burroughs B20s, with Intel 8086 and 80186 or 8186. I can't remember how you run. So that's a long time ago.
Yes.
It's a shame. It's a shame, but that is the nature of the industry. If you don't keep
Absolutely.
being mutable. We call it mutable. If you're not constantly changing, constantly evolving, you'll die.
Hey, if you are enjoying the content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Thank you. Okay, so our third topic is the State of Secret Sprawl Report 2024 by GitGuardian. Now, I really liked this report. I thought it was great in terms of the detail, the way it was actually presented. Sometimes I like the presentation. The presentation draws me into these reports, right? So they had the kind of summary, I think, online. So again, we'll provide links to all of this stuff in the description. But they had a really cool presentation on the website, really nice way to attract you in. But you could also just download the PDF as well, which Paul and I, being the nerds that we are about reports, we obviously downloaded the PDF. So it's the State of Secret Sprawl Report 2024. And we'll obviously not going to be able to do the whole thing justice. It's how many pages? 40 plus pages, I think.
Yeah.
And lots of detail in there actually as well, Paul. What was your kind of first impression when I shared it and you had a look at that? What was your kind of what took you first?
I just think the scale. The first thing. I mean, I'm not a developer. I've never worked in that sort of DevOps dev type arena in open systems and open source. I was staggered at the scale of how many secrets were being leaked effectively. And of course, the word secrets had all sorts of connotations. I was thinking, are the Russians and the Chinese having a field?
Not that kind of secret.
It's not that kind of secret. So my initial alarm was sort of soon assuaged, but it did raise a number of really interesting sort of connections in my mind that sort of other things, and the scale was part of it. And you're thinking, how on earth can you keep track of everything that's going on? And again, there was some reference to AI's ability or lack of ability at the moment to accurately predict and find out where these leaks and this sort of sprawl is occurring. But the first thing that hit me was I just was staggered by the volume. When GitGuardian was talking about how many, when they're sort of, there was a figure in there about how many hours and how many days it would take to search through all these and process them, even if you were using AI. It just blew my mind. It says, well, how do you control that? Therefore, so from that point, that was the sort of start point that was, excuse my French.
Yes, indeed. So that was and I think that's a perfectly normal reaction. So it says that the report, like I said, 40 pages long, says the report is focusing on the growth of the quote unquote complexity of the digital supply chain. So it includes a interesting forward, and I love these. You and I love scary stats, right?
Yeah.
So it includes a forward with some really cool scary stats. We'll try and get through those, and then other sections include things like what happens after a secret is actually leaked, and kind of what's the remediation efforts, the revoking of those secrets, hidden threats and things like that. Also, there's a section, not very long, but I think it's a few pages around how can sort of AI, be implemented in secrets detection. So how good can large language models or LLMs be at detecting secrets? And then the kind of the other scary part is are you sure you know what you're doing, basically? Or are you sure you know where your secrets are? So I thought that was interesting. And then, how do we go about solving this so-called secrets sprawl, which it is really a bit of a sprawl. So that's kind of the main aspects of the article. But let's hit on some of these scary stats in the forward, Paul. I thought those were quite cool. So let me see if I can get to those in here. Okay, so it says something like 12 plus million new secrets detected in public GitHub commits. So obviously GitHub being the repository for for source code, and when people commit that code, part of the sort of CI/CD sort of chain in DevOps environments. So 12 million plus secrets detected. Now that doesn't mean that those are bad, or they're badly configured or badly secured or anything like that. It just, that's how many there are, and that's, I think, up 28% from the excuse me, the previous year. So that's a staggering number in itself.
Yeah, I took that as being, you said it wasn't necessarily bad, and I questioned that as to whether actually what they were saying was that those credentials, that those secret credentials, should remain secret, and the 12 million were the ones that they could see that had somehow been leaked. And it was like, well, and that's when, because of, the word secret is a sort of, emotive one. You suddenly start thinking, what are the implications for the applications that these are going into? Are there ways into backdoors then that give people a chance to do that? Or does it just mean that all that code you've just written with credentials is now, somebody can actually get hold of and use because they've got your credentials? I don't know. I mean, but it just struck me that, I suppose the thing I was coming back to was, whatever happened to DevSecOps?
Yes. I think that's kind of, I'm not sure whether that's, because I mean, you can detect these, you can find them, you can try and download them, or you can try and make use of them. Whether they actually work, i.e., are they still valid? Did your DevSecOps platform pick them up and renewed them anyway, so they're now invalid as far as you trying to use them to penetrate into somebody's platforms? I don't know, because that's not really, it's just saying this is how much we detected in public GitHub,
but then there was another stat in there, and you need to find out, which there's a remediation one that says, GitHub keeps or is it GitGuardian keeps the remediation process live for 5 days or whatever it is,
yes.
So say up to 5 days, whether somebody has revoked something or changed it or moved it so that it's no longer visible in the way that it was before.
Yeah.
The percentage that met that 5 days was very small. Was it 5%?
Yes. Yeah, it wasn't I'll try and find the exact number, but it wasn't that big.
So 95% of the credentials that now appeared to be leaked, if that's the right word, were still unremediated 5 days later.
Sorry, yeah. So let me just correct what I said. So more than 90% of the secrets remain valid 5 days after being leaked.
Yeah. So again, you find that, again, is that a real problem? I mean, and the answer to that must be, well, I'm sure there is a problem, but it's not as bad as it sounds, because otherwise, all our systems would be crashing all over the place because, people were playing around with what they found, and
and I don't know what these, I don't know what these are doing. Are these all production? I doubt it. It's not really kind of distinguishing what these repositories are about, really. I've not seen, maybe it's in the report, but I've not seen the detail about what the repositories are about. It just says public GitHub commits. Okay, that's fine, but I mean, like I said, where are those in how does that kind of fit in with production systems, test and dev, and things like that?
Yeah, what it sort of showed, or or highlighted to me perhaps was that, Gartner, back in about the early 2000s, Gartner called the development of environment a cottage industry.
Mm.
Really interesting. Lots of little firms doing bits and pieces. And obviously you get open source now, and there's loads of individuals all developing, parts of applications, apps, services online. And to an extent, it doesn't feel like it's moved much beyond the cottage industry phase. Not, while CI/CD pipelines have industrialized a lot of the process, the actual front end of it is still, the woman in her shack in the west of Ireland weaving cloth.
Yeah.
Then is taken into an industrial process later on and work. And you think, okay, it's something's amiss. And then we talked about, and the research, the report mentions that there needs to be a greater shift left. You think, how many times have we heard over the last probably 10 years that in a dev and operations environment there needs to be a shift left? And yet we don't appear to have gone very far.
Yeah, we haven't
really
shifted.
Strange.
Yeah, we haven't really shifted a lot. So
let's shifted a lot.
Yeah, let's go just through some of the other scary stats as well. So it says 3 million repos leaked at least one secret. 50 million new code repositories on GitHub increased. So that's an increase of 22% from the previous year. Some of those were probably because of generative AI, so ChatGPT and GitHub, or Copilot and things like that. No doubt, kind of contributing to that. And then the map of leaks was interesting. So it had number one as India in the top spot, US second, Brazil third, China fourth, and then France fifth. It's like our European representative. Thank you.
It was interesting.
Putting us on the wrong map.
I mean, because France was fifth and Germany was 10th.
Yeah.
And the UK didn't appear. And you go, well, either we're very professional in our approach here, or we're not doing very much dev.
Oh, we're doing a lot of dev. I think maybe not enough dev for my liking, but I think we're doing
I would have thought we would know less code being generated than France or Germany. In fact, I would expect there to be more, given the sort of open source cloud type approaches that have been taken in the UK. And therefore I was really surprised that we didn't make the top 10 list of leaks. I mean,
I think I'd be happy with that, not making this top 10.
Pleasantly surprised. But the question is why? I'd love to know what, you can go India, huge amount of development, and it probably is very still cottage industry type. So it's going China, maybe the same. The States was an interesting one. But so I used France and Germany as the sort of, the benchmark for the UK. And I was pleasantly surprised we went on the list. But
States maybe just because of size. So India maybe in Brazil, because it's just not good practice, but a smaller size. Whereas US and China, because of size.
Yeah,
so it's a smaller number, but it's just the size kind of multiplies it.
So we could do with a slightly more nuanced table there as to what that actually means.
It'd be interesting to see.
It would be interesting to see because if the States and China and the UK have got better processes and better procedures and better culture, we ought to celebrate that and show the others how to do it. But
and then if you look at that I think the other chart was by industry. So not surprisingly, the IT industry 65%, and then 20% again not surprisingly, education industry, and then 14% other. Now in the other, there was things like science and tech. Again, yes, not surprising. I've had those types of customers, and they're terrible at secrets management. Retail, manufacturing, finance, public admin. That's as many as I listed. but there's more in that chart. But those are kind of the significant ones in the 14% other on that chart. But IT, yeah, being the top one at 65%. I'd have actually thought it was a lot more than that, but maybe it's kind of proportional, like I said, to
the size and volume of what they're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then obviously IT is going to be generating an awful lot of that. I mean, and that probably covers, not only the big companies that we all know and love or hate, but a number of other areas. All the software development, all the application development that's vendor oriented. Everything going on there. Yeah.
And then one other one, I think it was still in the scare stats, was the file extensions ranking. So which files are actually the biggest culprits? So from the env, or the environment file, which is the environment variables and configuration settings and so on. The key file containing cryptography, normally keys and for encryption, decryption processes. The PEM file, I know that one gets attacked quite a lot. Contains, again, cryptography keys and certificates and things like that for communication, securing communication. And then the local file, so containing kind of more machine-specific configuration stuff. So that was kind of the top 4 that I picked up on from the file extensions that have these types of secrets exposed in them.
I mean, I didn't recognize any of the file extensions because I'm not in that world at all. I was
it's mostly Linux kind of stuff, really. These are all pretty much Linux kind of stuff.
So again, I still ask the question at the end of all this is, what's the implication for us as end users and for businesses of these challenges? We are aware of problems, but how far are they caused by these? I don't know. So I couldn't, at the end of it, I couldn't really get a sense of how dangerous this was.
So I mean, I think what it's trying to do is expose the side that where you're encountering these types of activities within organizations. So these are kind of normal practices, or they're practices that are not tight enough to kind of try and eliminate some of these issues. It's not looking at the impact of this. So so there's 12 million whatever secrets exposed, or whatever the statistic was, but how many of those were actually exploited? How many of those were used to cause a major catastrophe, or a phishing scam, or a ransomware attack, or a DDoS or something like that? That side of it is not really covered.
There's an element of, in any organization, you're going to be thinking, well, how often is it likely to happen? Quite a lot, clearly. How serious is that going to be for us as an organization? If the answer is not very serious at all, then there's a limit to what firms will do and people will do to ensure that they get it right first time. So I think there's that. I mean, I was really intrigued by towards the end of the report too, where it started to look at, what are the potential remediations that you needed to get into. And apart from, plans to maybe make LLMs work better at doing it than they can at the moment. It was interesting that currently the LLM was only picking up about 75% of the leaked credentials.
I mean, it goes into, I think, awareness and training.
It does. They were all the things that you would have thought, well, we should be doing that anyway, and this is really old school. And again, it's part of this sort of shit. It's a cultural thing, and it comes back to, and the other thing that it comes back to, and this is much broader than just these credentials, is the challenge of speed. Everybody wants things fast, and the whole cloud environment has worked on the basis of more for less, faster. Faster, 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 and you get to a point where you think, what are you going to be sacrificing for that speed? And I think at times we're sacrificing accuracy, and we're therefore sacrificing security at times. And however hard you try to train and get the culture right, the effect of that will be to slightly slow it down.
Yeah.
But if the risk is great, then maybe that's what we've got to think about doing.
Yeah, and I think you know the word culture is really important, because this aspect, secrets management and so on, and using things like GitHub and whatever as kind of your source repository and so on. This is all part of that sort of migration to cloud, when you kind of leave behind some of the old ways of doing things and kind of trying to adopt this sort of DevOps agile kind of approach, platform engineering and so on. And I think this is just exposing one aspect of the challenge that organizations have when they start doing that or want to adopt these newer methodologies of producing services essentially for their businesses. So yeah, so I think it's quite cool. It did touch on generative AI secrets, I think, on page 30, and it said open AI services obviously were the most used. So over 46,000 API keys leaked actually occurred. The report obviously doesn't cover the whole year, so I suspect that's a lot higher. When the next version of the or the next copy of the report comes out. But also, the likes of Google, Bard and Gemini, Pinecone as a vector database, Replicate as a foundation model as a service in the AI space, Claude from Anthropic, Cohere, and were all sort of culprits as well. But OpenAI simply because, as I said, because
volume,
of sheer volume. Yeah. Cool. All right. So I think we are there. Like I said, the report is fantastic. Really good. Lots of good in-depth stuff. So definitely advise you guys to have a look. Again, I'll provide a link in the description of the video. Right. So thank you, as always, Paul. Really appreciate all your insights and comments. Links for everything, as we said, will be in the description of the video. Yeah, please do let us know what you would like us to maybe look at next time. If there's another interesting report or an article or a technology or something like that you want us to check out in a future episode of Cloud State of Play, do let us know. Drop us some comment. And yeah, let us know if any of this stuff kind of affects you, if you're thinking about it, you're doing it, and anything else that you want us to also cover in the future. That's it for this particular episode. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support me. You may also want to check out some of the other videos on this channel. Bye for now.